Welcome to Masters of Regeneration Radio. Conversations with humans who dare to reimagine our place on planet Earth. Earth is changing fast. Evolution happening in real time. An intimate, circular understanding of nature and living systems. We are the land. The land is us.
Hey everyone, this is your host Tomas Reyes, and this is episode 29 of Masters of Regeneration Radio. It's April 3rd, and we recorded this episode with Beth Rattner at the Biomimicry Institute in early March, a couple weeks before we entered quarantine, at least here in Colombia. Beth Rattner is the executive director for the Biomimicry Institute, a nonprofit dedicated to helping current and future innovators reconnect to nature so that we may create more regenerative products and services. Beth directs the Institute's strategic vision and mission to create a new generation of nature-inspired innovators and oversees the organization's 3 programs: Youth Design Challenge, Global Design Challenge, and Ask Nature. She's a frequent speaker on how biomimetic design in products, cities, and agriculture can bring about a new level of repair and cooperation to our economy and ecosystem, which in turn will spur new levels of social equity. Beth Rattner has been working in sustainability since 2000 and is currently the executive director of the Biomimicry Institute. You can check it out at biomimicry.org. The Institute brings the practice of bio-inspired design to hundreds of thousands of people a year through its education and entrepreneurship programs. She speaks publicly on how biomimetic design of human products and systems can restore our economy and environment. An attorney by training, Beth was also a managing director for one of the first sustainability business consultant firms, Blue Sky, and business manager for Hewlett-Packard's Emerging Market Solutions Group. This Hewlett-Packard internal startup championed a new lens on providing technology solutions to those who earn less than $2 a day. Beth lives in Marin County, California. Here we go. How would you do it, nature? How would you do it? In this episode, we talk about healing our gut. We talk about our microbiome and the Earth's different biomes, about these gut-wrenching times, no pun intended, about our shadows, about our personal truth, coming back to our belonging place, enduring and learning all we need to learn during this collective healing transition. We talk about fermentation as an alternative to the textile industry and letting go of our dependency on oil, and giving nature her rightful place at the table in our decision-making process as a species. Little did we know that nature was going to show us who's boss, right? Beth said during our conversation something like, well, maybe there are more steps ahead that frighten me a bit. Well, here we are. Those steps ahead are here. We're all here at home, like Mother Nature sent us all to our rooms to think about what we've done and reflect on how we move forward now, acknowledging what is truly essential in our efforts to bring back that vibrant world that Earth is. What is essential, I ask myself, constantly, repeatedly. Breathing, drinking water, and eating foods that are alive, nourishing our body and mind with awareness, gratitude, presence, wisdom, patience. Going within to listen to knowledge beyond our human mental constructs. We coexist with millions of other species that are living and adapting to an ever-changing environment, and they do it in harmony with nature. How about COVID-19 for an accelerator for us, sapiens? How about this for building global unity consciousness? It takes a very different mindset than the mainstream one that has prevailed to recognize all natural organisms we coexist with as beings, as people, just like us. So Here we go. This is episode 29 of Masters of Regeneration Radio with Beth Rattner. We are on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, and all those good podcast platforms. And you can also take a look at all the episode links and details on mastersofregeneration.com. Here we go, and I'll see you guys on the next episode.
I also think there's some degree of information overload. I was watching a podcast with, like a video podcast with Rich Roll and Russell Brand, and they both said, "So many podcasts in the world."
Yes, totally. There's so much, and now I'm a little bit on tour giving my regenerative cuisine and lacto-fermentation workshop, and people love it. And there's this, I really healed my gut in the last 3 years after I did this genetic sequencing test in the US.
Oh my gosh, I got to listen to this one because I have the same problem.
Oh, okay. So I specialize in regenerative cuisine and functional nutrition, and my school, it comes from the, ancestral nourishing traditions and all that. But 3 years ago when I did Biome, which is this stool test in the US, it's beautifully designed. They send it to you, and they send a prepaid envelope to send it back, and then you get the results in the app on your phone, essentially. But they do
cool.
They do a genetic sequencing of the RNA of all your gut bacteria and viruses.
Whoa! I want to do this.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I totally want to do this.
Yeah, and because they do the RNA sequencing, they can look at the function of all those bugs in your gut.
Yeah.
And so that's why they can recommend at your current state of things in your gut what foods are the best and what are your superfoods, what foods to avoid and all that. And they recommend some probiotics, but they also give you an insight into your capacity to digest proteins and some other processes in the gut, as well as your diversity and richness in microbiome composition. So I saw that it was really low, and I was like, okay, given what I know, what can I do? And I spent 20 years not eating bread, not eating pizza, not eating pasta.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because I used to be severely gluten intolerant. And so I was like, well, in this lifetime, I'm not going to eat bread. It's all good. I kind of made peace with that. And I said, anyway, I'm just going to be more committed to eating fermented stuff and having bone broth on a daily basis, if possible.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 2.5 years. And then I've been eating sourdough bread for a year, almost every day. And I feel great. So I'm like, oh my God, I healed myself.
Amazing. That is really consistent with another story I've heard here in the Bay Area. A man who went through a very similar process, and and it's the kind of grain, So where do you source your grain, and then how is it fermented? So how is it? Is it an overnight proof, right? And but there's a great bakery here called Tartines in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I know my sourdough stuff.
Yeah.
They opened up a new shop where I live in Marin, and I'm there every week.
Oh, beautiful! So jealous. No, I'm not jealous because I have a great sourdough place as well here in Bogota.
Otherwise, I'll send it to you. I'll send you some bread.
That would be great. I love tartine. So I'm a cook. I'm not a pastry chef. I'm not a baker. And I was always terrified of making bread. And then last year, when I started eating bread again, I was like, you know what? And now I make amazing bread. And I'm like, it was so easy. I don't know what I was scared about.
Oh, that's so cool. There's a great, well, I'm glad that you've already conquered that fear because here at Green Gulch, which is part of the San Francisco Zen Center, there's this, he's a baker, and he teaches people how to make sourdough because he believes that sourdough is the food of life and we need to all know how to make it. And so it's a really sort of meditative practice, the way he teaches it. It's so much fun.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, that's been the experience giving my lactofermentation workshop these days. I just came back from another city. We had last Saturday, we had a beautiful country house and we had 12, 13 people there, and just people's reaction. I had lacto-fermented some cherry tomatoes and some chayote and some green mango. And so we made like a regular caprese, but with fermented cherry tomatoes. So there are these sour bombs, with good basil and olive oil and just people eating those fizzy, alive little things. They get excited, they get, and one of them said, wow, I finally got it. I understood. My body says, whoa, I love this. Thank you so much. And it's not my mind saying, oh, this is good for me. It's just my body's reaction just going, thank you. Finally, you give me something good.
I know.
So, because before I used to teach more, stuff related to bone broth, and then people don't really get it, and they just think you're making some chicken soup. No matter how many weird ingredients, like you can pull out all the adaptogens and the weird roots and all the beautiful, wizardry, and nothing gets to people like lactofermentation. They're like, wow. So, and then they learn they can make kimchi and krauts and brine some veggies, and they'll be ready super fast.
It's amazing. By the way, my I have friends I'm happy to introduce you to, the Shockies, Kirsten and Christopher Shocky. They're up outside of Ashland, Oregon.
Okay.
And they have a couple books out on fermentation.
Oh,
they have a little farm up in Ashland, and they sort of same thing. Like Christopher loved to bake, but he kept getting chubbier. He's a huge guy. He was not chubby, but his wife said he was chubby. Yeah. And so she's like, why don't we ferment something else? He's like, how about cider? And she's like, how about something else? Like vegetables. And so they did, and they've been, it's such an empowering workshop that they give, and they've crafted these really beautiful little books, and happy to connect you with them.
Sweet. I'd love that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I think.
Well, they would love to meet you because they're not chefs. And so when they meet somebody like you who knows what to do with their product, they're like, oh, this is exciting.
I'll send you some photos of the last workshop. People were so high. They were just high on fermented stuff. It was beautiful.
I want to come. I want to come take a workshop.
Yeah. No, they actually all said, can we please make this into a retreat so we can actually learn how to also make vinegar and probiotic sauces and all the other stuff, that I make. Because it was 6 hours, but it was not enough. People were just like, oh my God, I would have totally paid $1,000 and not $300 for your workshop.
Yeah,
I was
just
like,
to
oh,
stay
interesting.
Yeah,
no, just for that day. And I was like, okay, I might revisit how much I value myself.
Yes, it's important to value yourself and to realize that you're giving people health. I mean, we're going to have to start taking health back into our own hands.
Yeah, and that ties in beautifully to what we're going to talk about. Because at the beginning, I tell people, I show them what's kind of like what's understanding of the act of eating and what food actually is and why we eat. Why do we eat, really? I ask them, and they're like, oh, for energy and for pleasure, for love, to share. And I'm like, yeah, but beyond that, more essentially, what is it? And no one ever says because it's genetic memory that our body needs to evolve or something like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the relationship between your immune system, your digestive system, your endocrine system, and see how they're all related and constantly communicating and giving your body signals to adapt to this changing environment.
And no, go ahead, keep going.
No, and we talk about emotions and everything that's related. So I realized, I healed my gut, but it wasn't until I came back to Colombia last August, and I really did a lot of inner work to heal my relationship with my homeland, with Colombia,
right.
where I was born, and just let go of some narratives that didn't belong to me, but to my family and other stuff, and that I ended up fully healing, and the anxiety was gone and a bunch of other things. And so it's,
I just got chills from that. That makes perfect sense. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was so excited by what you were just saying.
Yeah.
There's been so many studies that show that you could surround a person with good nutrition and they will still be sick if they haven't healed that core inner wound.
Yeah, absolutely.
We stop ourselves from being healthy. And similarly, or conversely, you could actually have a very healthy relationship to yourself, to your place, to your spirit, and eat crap and actually be almost okay.
Yes. Yeah, it's mind blowing the extent to which it influences our lives, and all that's unprocessed. And it's been quite a ride to just like really look at some parts of you that you didn't want to look at, and uncover all that good stuff, and really look at old pains and old narratives and some limiting beliefs and prohibitions, all self-imposed, but
all self-imposed.
It's been so healing for me. Yeah,
I'm going to start following I want to start following your journey, Tomas, because it feels very important and relatable to so many of us.
Well, you know what? It's been mind blowing because I've given these workshops for years, and I was always kind of wanting to do one-on-one work with people, and it kind of never materialized. Until in December, I had done all this inner work, and one day it just came to me. And I opened, the year started, and just 2 months ago, I opened my practice for this work that consists in recognizing yourself in your relationship with food, and then looking back with my patients and going down into their first 10 years of life and what they love to eat and their relationship to the people that actually fed them and took care of them, and everything just comes to the surface right away, and people go like, oh my God, I never thought about it like that. And it just unlocks a bunch of unconscious drivers for whatever is making people feel pain or be frustrated with their hypoglycemia or diabetes or overweight, and you see to what extent it's emotional. Of course, there's also but just holding that space for people to recognize where they're coming from and and making conscious what it is that's driving them that's been unhealed until now. And then from there, we can pull all the toolbox, all the regenerative cuisine, all the ancestral nourishing tradition methods and all those principles and apply them. But now we're applying them from a place of consciousness and a place that can actually help them for their actual needs in the present, free from all that past stuff. So it's been amazing.
I feel like I want to just talk to you about this. But I guess we can. But it's powerful to hear about, and I really do want to learn more. And I think there was a book written years ago that was given to me, so it was probably written back in the 70s, called "God on a Harley." Have you ever heard of it?
No.
So "God on a Harley" is about, like a Harley Davidson, is about this woman's, she's a nurse and she's stressed and she's been in bad relationships and she lives in this house that she can't really afford, and basically one night she's walking on the beach and she gets visited by God driving a Harley. And God's position is, I used to issue these decrees from on high for the masses. That doesn't work. I have to visit everybody one-on-one and talk to them and listen to what's going on for them. And then I can shift the world.
Wow.
And so that's how it works. And he basically, through this process of loving each other, not in a romantic way, but in a true, just supportive way, her life becomes transformed. And it's a great story. I highly recommend it.
I'll check it out. It sounds great. Yeah, and in a way, it's a good metaphor for because many of us dream of changing the world, and then you realize the more, which is paradoxical, because the more you walk the inner journey, and it takes courage to look at your shadows and
Yeah.
everything that pain or that fear that you've carried, that little child that's scared of, not being loved, or whatever
Yeah.
it is that we all carry, those essential human fears. And then you go through that, and your world starts kind of materializing differently. And you're like, the more I focus on myself and the more I go within, the more the world sort of changes. The more I get to do what I wanted to do in the first place, but it was not by doing it here outside in the world, but doing it, inside by looking within.
Yeah.
So,
well, and we have to change that default human position of fear. It's fundamentally the thing that's going to drive us under, and maybe the planet at the same time, although the planet will recover faster than humans.
Yeah.
And that can't happen at the mass level. It has to happen at the individual level, the way that you're describing it.
Yeah,
we have to
exactly.
sort of reckon with our dark side and our shadow. Otherwise, and there are models for how to do it in a way that doesn't have to feel so gut-wrenching to go back to the gut.
Yeah. Well, the pearl really for me has been to understand that there was nothing to fear in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
That whatever fear of judgment that I carried for so many years, and the more I communicate my truth, the more people go like, "Oh, wow, that's amazing," and I'm like, "Oh, okay."
It's just my truth. Yeah.
Because when you're connected to your truth, then it kind of vibrates people hear it, and it almost doesn't matter what you're saying, because the energy of what you're saying is so clear, and so it's so your truth that people go like, oh my god, it's so nice to like hear someone talking deeply about something that is very essential to them. And then on the other hand, just recognizing that all those shadows and all that were there for a long time, just saying, hey, we have some stuff for you to look at, for you to learn, so you can heal, right?
Yeah.
So they were not monsters that we're gonna, of course, it's our fight or flight or survival mechanism that goes like, I don't want to look at that because I'm gonna die. But
exactly.
And then it was the opposite, it was just they're there. And so once you pass that threshold and you go to the other side, and you realize, oh, I can integrate them, I can love these parts of me that I had learned not to love and to hide, And
it's so right on. It's exactly, and that's sort of I think that's a little bit of the beauty of biomimicry. And I'm not really even trying to force a transition. I honestly,
no, but it's completely related,
But it's very related.
Yeah.
It's when we get two things happen. One, that deep sense of relief of going, wait a minute, I don't have to figure this all out by myself. There are literally millions of other species who are doing the same thing that we want to do, and they've done it low cost, low energy, without toxifying the environment. And we can live here on this planet and still have food and shelter and clothing. We can just do it in a radically different way. And there are mentors, there are beings on this planet here to help us. And that is a very different mindset. And it ties to many indigenous cultures that these are our cousins, these are our brothers and sisters in the other species. We're not alone, but we have adopted this narrative of go it alone, bootstrap, your own success, and it's resulted in the degradation that we have.
Yeah,
but as soon as we kind of like shift that mindset and go like, wait a minute, we're part of a team here. And then we start looking out for our teammates in a very different way, because we're learning from them. We're not just learning about them. We're learning from the shadow side equivalent in the biomimicry world to me is like the springtail, which is this little marine organism. And it's if you saw it, you would be scared of it. Like if it had infested your house, you'd be like, oh my God, you'd squish them all.
Yeah.
But it's one of the few organisms that actually can repel oil. And it does it through these tiny little hairs, basically suspends the oil up on the edges of the hair. And in doing so, it is the key to water repellency, replacing perfluorinated chemicals. It's the key for the semiconductor industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar solution.
Wow.
But it's something that you would literally have squished if you were not in your right mindset, you know? And so that to me is that's what we're looking at, is like, how do we change our appreciation of everything?
Yeah.
And then fear is gone.
Yeah, totally. And also you're integrating, because what you were saying, we've been identified with the power of the human mind and the rational mind, and just depending exclusively on the rational mind. And then you realize nature has a lot to offer. And that information comes in more subtle packaging,
Mm-hmm.
And also acknowledging nature as with her own seat at the table.
Yeah, we talk about that. We talk about that.
And then, I mean, that's also been part of the process for me, coming back to Colombia and reconnecting to a bunch of that, indigenous knowledge and traditions from the Amazon, and that's a whole other conversation. I won't go into details, but having that support. Like what?
Next time, I want to hear that one.
Yeah.
That's a recurring theme, by the way, though, to coming home, coming back to our place.
Oh, yeah.
It's a huge one. And I think it's actually, I mean, we'll talk about this a little bit, because I think it's the future. I think bioregionalism and reconnecting to place in a very deep way is probably the only thing that we could do that would make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another thing I kind of let go of last year. I carried for so many years that global citizen label.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Oh, I speak all these languages, and I've lived in Japan and New York and LA and all these places. And I was like, you know what? I'm Colombian. And I'm just going to drop the definition of who I am from all the social media and all that stuff. And what a relief also.
Yeah, but in that process, you also developed huge empathy you saw the similarity of humans all around the world.
Of course.
And that was an important journey. But that is Odysseus, right? That's the Odyssey, is you always come back home, but you have to go around the world first before you realize that home is where home is.
Yeah, exactly. I wonder, I don't think they tell what happened afterwards when he comes home, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. You know what? That's a great question.
Yeah.
No.
But it's a beautiful process, and I think, like you were saying, it's so related to it. It needs to happen both at the level of regenerating your gut, if you need to do that, and also healing emotionally. That needs to happen at the individual level, but there's also kind of this collective journey that we're all experiencing, and humanity as a whole is going through that.
Well, I actually wonder, you're the first person I'm saying this to out loud, so if it doesn't fully make sense, you can tell me. But so I wonder if the emphasis on the gut biome is almost a harbinger or symbolic of the fact that nature works in biomes as well. Yeah. We call it a genius of biome, and we should look at the organisms. And it's more than just a watershed. It's actually an entire region of how the world works. The tundra is a biome, for instance. The Mediterranean is a biome. And what if, again, going back to that sort of individual coaching idea, that we have to heal our own biome first for us to then understand that we have to heal the biomes of the planet.
Oh,
but if we didn't do it personally first, we wouldn't even know how.
Yeah. Wow. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Of course, because you're also kind of acknowledging that you coexist with these hundreds of thousands of bacteria, and then even larger numbers of viruses.
Yeah.
And that it's a fairly new science, and that they are responding and sending signals to all your hormones and your nervous system, and your gonads, and you're going to pass all that information on if you have kids, and then you understand yourself beyond yourself as a kind of container of that journey of life. And in that process, then you might drop the idea that you're just your mind or just yourself separated from nature. People last week from the workshop, they were saying, "Oh my God, I never thought of food like that. Thank you for showing me that food is not stuff. It's not some sort of object that we put in our mouths to get energy."
No. We are like the epitome. Maybe there's more steps that frighten me but are ahead, but like we've reduced food to these, to a bar, to an energy drink, and because we've lost our appreciation for what it is.
Yeah.
But it's coming back, right? It's changing. Certainly the slow food movement has done huge amounts. Remembering fermentation is a big part of that.
Yeah. And if you think about it, pretty much everything was fermented, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, it's going to be the future, again, of fiber, of yarn, of fashion. The fermentation is probably the way that we'll get out of petroleum.
Wow.
Petrochemical and polyester.
How so? I mean, in the textile industry? Or?
In the textile industry, that's right.
How does that work? Now we can jump right into biomimicry. That sounds fascinating. I never heard of that.
Yeah, it's so. And I have to my total disclaimer is that I am not a biologist. I'm not a chemist. I was a lawyer.
Okay.
And I worked as a sustainability management consultant and just fell in love with this whole way of thinking. But I'll come back to that to me in just a second. But for fermentation, it's the first thing I ever saw on this was a woman giving a TED talk who grew a giant kombucha in her bathtub.
Okay.
And giant kombucha, right? And she takes this kombucha and she basically starts to roll it out with a rolling pin, dries it, realizes that she can that it has a leather-like quality to it,
like a Scoby leather.
That's right.
Beautiful.
That's right. And so now we're seeing things like there's a company called AgroLoop, and they're taking cellulosic waste from pineapple fields, or from actually any sort of ag waste, like from corn even, and turning it into fiber. And that all happens through a fermentation process.
Wow.
So fermentation, and it's amazing because we've become so addicted to things like, I want my leggings to be stretchy. Mm-hmm. And I can't live without my leggings, right? So what are we going to do in a petrochemical-free world? Well, we're going to rely on the way that nature does pretty advanced chemistry, which is and fermentation is one of those examples. Mm. It's going to be important to determine what the feedstock is, because you can very rapidly see how humans will take a good idea and turn it into a mega scaled idea.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say something like that about some of those vegan burgers that just hit the market, in the past few years.
It's the same problem. It's completely the same problem.
And they also use the fermentation process of molecules.
I think it's a good reminder that it's not really about the process. It's really about our intention. And if we start with the right intention first, then we will find the ways to be scientifically rigorous and to be adventurous even. And the resurrection of fermentation in fabric is one of those things. But you can't lose the ethos. You can't lose the intention.
Yeah, intention is everything. I mean, we're smart. We decided 70 years ago that we just needed to focus on making as much money as possible. So we did.
Yeah. Yeah.
But clearly that's not sustainable, right? It's not.
No, but the opportunity that we have is to kind of see it as that there is this window of wealth that we generated as a planet, and that window will close. But the question is, now with a little bit better levels of awareness, what do we want to do with that money before it's gone? And while we have this last bits of opportunity to change how we design everything, because we're still designing anyway. We're still making shoes every day. We're still making carpets every day. We don't have to make them the same way.
Yeah.
And but this is why intention, awareness, and then looking to nature for the biological blueprints on how to do it. And then you bring in the chemistry. Then you bring in like the new methodologies, whether that's growing your fibers in a really responsible way, which is the resurgence of regenerative ag in this space is also huge.
Mm-hmm.
But it's but that window of wealth will make it possible to transition pretty quickly, but we just have to decide.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, how do we decide? The big question for, I guess shareholders and and funders and all that is like, where do we decide how much is enough,
Yeah.
Or how is profit distributed? I was reading this wonderful article about the sharing economy, and the author was saying that Uber, Airbnb, and all of those companies, they look like the sharing economy because they are in a way, but then there's still that model where Uber is taking, the lion's share, and the people who actually put their assets on the line, their assets on the line.
Yeah, they are. They're on the line.
They're not partaking in that massive abundance opportunity. So yeah, I think like you were saying, we're redesigning all of it, how we make things, what for, just refining those intentions and refining the distribution as well. It's a fascinating process.
It's such an important question though that you asked, which is, so how do we get industry to shift? And I used to think that it was consumer demand, right? Just like with politicians, like we cannot wait for regulation because even though it is a tremendous driver, there's a lot of proof that the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act here in the United States was a net job creator, was a net GDP generator. And rolling that back, it just seems stupid and horrendous. That being said, it was it took real leadership, and there was enough of a movement at the time started in the 60s saying like, this is what we are demanding for our for the world that we live in today. That you're seeing that same kind of consumer pull in the organic food movement. But even with all that consumer pull, you're still having 6% of all food made. You would know better than I. 6% is, I think, organic, and that's after 20 years of a pretty good following. So consumers can't shift it by themselves. You have to have leadership in companies, and that will usually happen through the disruptors. The disruptors are people like Allbirds, who are saying, I'm not going to make tennis shoes or I'm not going to make sneakers out of petrochemicals. I'm going to use sugarcane. It's another fermentation process, by the way.
Yeah.
And as long as it's sustainably sourced and their wool is sustainably sourced, you are now seeing all of these other wool sneakers pop up on the market. The same thing was true for Method, the soap company. We're not going to ship our products with water anymore. We're not going to use toxic chemicals, and they're going to be beautiful. Procter & Gamble followed suit within a year.
Yeah.
So I think it's the entrepreneurs. It's one of the reasons why we back entrepreneurs, why we say we were creating a new species of innovator, because that is the model. Like repeatedly, at least here in the West, you get a disruptive innovation, and then it shifts the rest of the sector.
Yeah. So in a way, there's the regulations. There's also the economic incentive or the proof of concept. Like, what are these? What are those companies doing or companies like Method or like Allbirds? They're still profitable because otherwise they wouldn't be.
Oh yeah.
In business.
It takes them a while though.
Yeah.
Look, I happen to know Adam Lowry, who started Method, and he said it took them 7 years to be. He funded Method on his credit card in the beginning, and that's because he had such conviction. He and his partner did tremendous work in those early stages, and I think we make it hard for entrepreneurs. They really have to leverage so much of their personal worth to do it, and we hope that it pays off. But the hope is that you're doing something that is truly good. And we live in a very restricted material palette world. Like, again, most of what people use are petrochemical based chemicals and processes. We've got to shift off of that. We know that. And so those innovations are probably the most important. If I had to put down 2 bets in this world, it would be regenerating the soil and new molecules so that we can live in harmony here.
New molecules.
Mm-hmm. Green chemistry.
Okay.
There's the role for green chemistry. John Warner he and Paul Anastas wrote this book called The 12 Principles of Green Chemistry. And it's very nature inspired, life based principles. And it always comes back to the fact that for the last 100 years, so to your point, around the last 70 years of investing in an industrial system that generates only wealth and not life anywhere else.
Yeah.
We did the same thing, with petroleum. We just invested in making it more and more refined. We did the same thing with corn. Corn is now in everything.
Yeah.
Well, we're learning now that we can actually be more intelligent with our bio-based materials, and we don't want to ask biology to completely replace, and we don't want like GMO level adaptations that are dangerous. But we can be really smart about what we do with biologically driven materials. The mycelium, the ecovatives of the world and the mycoworks of the world, like they're doing really cool stuff. And that feels, put this way, even the best of intentions around the circular economy. And this is hard for me to say because I was the head of the Cradle to Cradle Institute for a long time, where we sold this idea that you could have a technical metabolism, right? That was different than your biological metabolism. And in your technical metabolism, your cell phone would be endlessly captured and recovered, and you could have your new cell phone.
Yeah.
But what we're finding is that humans are super messy.
Yeah.
And we don't keep things in our lives like we're supposed to. Even when there's financial incentive to do that, and there is, by the way. So it's not about greed, it's truly about like sloppiness. I think, I'm not sure what the word is, but it's that leaks will happen in the system. So if we can start with biological materials, at least that we know are safe, that feels like a more intelligent way to evolve. And then let's put a lot of intelligence and material design into making those same molecules better.
That's wonderful. It sounds so exciting just to acknowledge the wisdom of nature and all those processes that are biochemical, that are wonderful, and tapping into that, and then sustaining that intention to keep that flow, that biogeochemical flow of things in balance as well. That's
and we're going to be able to have everything that we want. I really believe that. I think that we won't. I don't think we should produce 80 to 100 billion garments a year for 7 billion people on the planet. I think that's madness.
Yeah.
And especially because we know that all 7 billion are not buying. So it's really a small subset of that are buying that much clothing, and the rest is getting burned. And we know that. It's just like food waste is a ridiculous problem. That's a distribution problem. And we have to shift out of that more and more and more because, like you were saying before, we feel empty inside. We feel lost, or we feel fear-based, and we are using it as a compensatory mechanism to try to feel whole.
Yeah.
So we have to address that. Yeah. But at the same time, we have to make things better. Just full stop. We have to make things better. And we can start with really advanced design concepts by understanding how the natural world works. And if you look at a peacock feather under a microscope, right, it's gonna look brown. It's because it is the process. That vibrant blue and the vibrant green is structural. It is basically canceling out every other color, and you're seeing, and your eye is picking up only the light reflected back of the blue.
Wow.
And
that's awesome.
That means it never fades, right? So it never fades. And it's not made with heavy metals. So how do we start to adopt that way of using structure to create the different functions that we want. And then there's, by the way, there's also room on the natural side of the scale too, which is 5,000 years ago in the Andes, they found that cotton grew with color in it. It grew in these really beautiful tones of like kind of amber and khaki green and certainly forms of yellow. Oh yeah, colored cotton is a real thing.
And how did they do it? Or was it just varieties, some heirloom varieties or something like that?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I'm sure it was a reflection of the kind of soil that it grew in as well. But and you could cultivate. I want green. And in fact, in World War II, when cotton was limited, we actually bought a whole bunch of it. And so we brought it back. But, and this is just, again, so human, it didn't work with the long staple white cotton machinery that we already had in place. So we're like, ditch it.
Yeah.
Because
it's not efficient.
It's not efficient.
Yeah.
But by the way, it's softer. It smells better. And you don't ever have to dye it. And the color only gets stronger as you wash it. It's the most phenomenal stuff.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so how do we go back to these solutions that actually already exist and with a small investment in processing? I mean, this is just like mechanical processing from, 100 years ago that we should be able to resurrect that or frankly, and improve upon it. How do we look at what's right in front of us?
What a great story. I love it. Yeah.
That's because you're a food guy and you understand regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
And we see that, by the way. I think that that's part of the future is that we will see farms where the colored cotton grows together with the legumes and the nitrogen is fixing, right back into the soil because cotton is a heavy feeder. And so how do we start to conceive, and we'll have, sheep and goats grazing in the fields as well. And
we'll have pink and turquoise sheep and goats.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, I said that was a joke, obviously, but also in the spirit of just recovering all that diversity of different varieties of everything, which we have lost in the last 100 years, of seeds and all that. The world all of a sudden might turn into this wonderful color palette landscape that is almost trippy. That we don't have anymore because we have carrots are orange and lettuces are green and that's it.
Right. No, I think.
And corn is yellow, whereas,
exactly.
and potatoes are brown.
Those are your only choices.
When there's 500 varieties of potatoes and they're all colors, purple and, all those different colors, and the same for everything for corn.
And that is the future, is bringing back that vibrant world. And we can do it because but we have, again, there's that window of time that we can go back to resurrecting these deep patterns that are already in front of us, and being okay with the fact that it's a little bit like your Return to Columbia story. I think there's a lot of glamour and cachet of being a citizen of the world, but I think when we come back to knowing our land and knowing our place and saying, I'm going to raise potatoes, and I'm going to raise a lot of different colors of potatoes, and I'm going to see what my land can support. You get away from these big questions like, what are we going to do about climate change? You get away from the big questions because, as Wendell Berry says so beautifully, he's like, we don't have the right to ask what's the big answer. All we have the right to do is be in our place and ask the land, what does it need? We have to find ourselves back in relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when we do that, oh my gosh, it's like the biggest little farm. It's like one solution after the other will reveal itself, but it takes more time. It's definitely not the industrial scale we're used to. But I think that it will be more resilient. I think that we will have local jobs again. I think we will see our rivers come back. I think we will see it's a very different thing when you can buy a pair of jeans or your red hoodie, not knowing what the rivers in China are looking like because of your purchase.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's just devastating, to go a little bit into the negative here.
Yeah.
The Amazon is full of mercury, for
Yeah.
example,
Ugh.
and kids are being
How does
born
that happen? How did it get
from
so
all the
full?
gold mining.
Oh, from the mining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so many other things, right? Like the what is it called? Atrazine or atraz? I don't know. One of those
Oh, yes.
pesticides that is
Yes.
so it's permeated so much the natural cycles of the planet that now it's considered a human caused natural cycle.
Oh,
Because it's so prevalent everywhere. And
yeah.
at the same time, like you were saying, it's this decentralization process. It will for sure just bring back biodiversity, make more dynamic the local economies where, there's this horrible word, glocalization process. But
Oh, yeah.
it's a terrible word, but it really describes the whole process, and where people are actually growing food that is local, that is seasonal, and they understand that whatever they put into the water is going to end up in their bodies, right? So,
Well, and to be
um,
clear, like I'm not willing to give up your coffee. I am not willing to give up chocolate.
uh,
I am right. So like
no, but
there,
you have the choice to like give that money to the
that's
good
right.
producers, right? To the people who are actually. I have friends here who have an amazing chocolate brand, and they work in 5 different states around Colombia with small farmers, and they grow the cacao in what's the word, food forest structures,
Hmm.
and they pay them really well, and they don't make as much money, but it's still a profitable company. But they're taking care of all the stuff. They're taking care of the soil. They're taking care of the small farmer. They're taking care of the product. They pay them more because they ask those farmers to ferment those beans in such and such, way so that they get the final product that they want, and we all get to eat that amazing chocolate. And like you were saying, you're also there's that palate that only comes from soil, right? So all those chocolate bars, depending on the farm, depending on the region, have very specific flavors that come out through
That's
the
right.
fermentation process. And so it just makes your life so much richer,
Mm.
the experience, right? In
It
in so many
does,
levels.
and that's I think it's this concept. Years ago, Jed Emerson wrote this idea around blended value for capitalism 2.0 or even 3.0, and it was that we would give up our stuff, we would give up our long commutes for the high salary to have higher value lives. We would
Yeah.
want to. We would willingly go there, and I think that the soil is just like everything begins and ends with the soil. And we have lived in a society where we're so removed from it. Like literally here in San Francisco, we pave over it,
Hmm.
and therefore you stop seeing it.
Hmm.
And just like there's so many wonderful examples of daylighting rivers that had been covered up by concrete or industrial,
Oh yeah.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
And then you daylight the river, and what happens? Like you start to pay attention to the health of the river, and then little shops pop up alongside the river, and people walk along them, and a community comes back. It happened here in Napa, or you have like the story of the Hudson River Valley, and how by making a financial decision to improve the health of the Hudson and starting up at the Catskills and changing the fertilizer runoff from the farms, they avoided the infrastructure costs around, like I think it was UV filtration and now they have the best tasting water in the world because it's an alive river
Yeah.
again.
Wow.
And of course there's other stories, but
Yeah.
I feel like, yeah, let me share though that I think this is where looking to nature is helping, and we're seeing students super young, by the way, like starting when they're in middle school, get it and realize that they can leapfrog they don't even fully understand the physics principles or the engineering concepts that are at work, because they're just looking at the seed pod, right? They're just looking at the thing that they're trying to emulate. So in the case of this one team out of right here in Northern California, they wanted to think about energy production. We have all these tides, right? Tidal zones. And there's tidal kite energy as a way that you can basically capture energy. The problem is that right now you have to stabilize the kite. So imagine it's kind of doing these figure 8 loops. And you have to stabilize it usually with energy to keep it from moving in a smooth motion. So just like with turbulent air for wind hydrofoils, like the more turbulence you have, the less you can capture the energy effectively and efficiently. So you really want smooth lines whenever you're doing energy capture like that. Mm-hmm. And so unfortunately, like right now, the way that they stabilize it is by using energy to make the kite move more smoothly. This team looked at this seed pod, actually based out of Peru, and I can't remember, it's like the Javan cucumber, and it's this beautiful, huge, looks like a maple leaf seed pod, and it just floats, and it'll float on the air for up to 2 miles, because that's its adaptation. That is its survival strategy. If it can float far away from where it lives, kind of like you did when you were like, if it could float far away, it had a chance at a different level of survival that wasn't immediately possible otherwise. So this team looked at that. They emulated that same exact design, changed it dramatically from how commercial applications of tidal kite energy works today, and they were able to get it to work so quickly. And
that's working smart, right?
It's working smart because they started with a design that is actually already proven. We have the same thing true in solar and in replacing other wind capture or water capture. And I can tell you about all of them. But that's the theme, is that if you understand how the biology works, your design, your engineering gets a whole lot better really quickly.
Oh, that's amazing. So wonderful, because it really is working smart. I mean, nature, like the example you were saying of the peacock and how it refracts light, and structurally it looks like blue metal,
right?
But it's not.
Right. There's like those insects that look like they're gold. Have you ever seen like those little beetles? They look like they're gold or silver. Yeah. The scarab looks like it's a rainbow. It's stunning. And if you've ever had the misfortune of seeing what the rivers look like in China, it is a wake-up call that we can't keep doing this. And the fact is that we don't have to. I think that's the other big part of it. And we're seeing this. This is actually why I got into this work. Like I said, I'm not a biologist, but I was working for a tech company. I was working for Hewlett Packard, and a friend of mine gave me the book Cradle to Cradle, and also then popped on my desk Biomimicry. And I read these books, and I'm like, oh my gosh, why isn't everybody designing this way? Yeah. Why are we not designing for understanding what our resource constraints are? We are literally in this very linear economy, and we have to shift. And when I heard this example, the two things that got me, one was there's a company called Sharklet, and Sharklet makes a thin film. And so on a shark's skin, certain sharks, not all, this one basking shark, a slow-moving shark, this guy notices that there's no barnacles on its skin. He's like, that's weird. Like, why are there no barnacles on that slow-moving shark, but there are on, this whale? Yeah. And if you look under a microscope, you instantly sort of see why. It's because the skin of the shark looks like a series of ridges. Kind of like, look at the back of your hand, how your fingers form those ridges. That is what it's called dermal denticles, and it's shaped in these triangles with those ridges. So the bacteria literally never adheres. So this company says, I wonder if we emulate that design onto a thin film, if that would work. And sure enough, it repels like 85% of bacteria just by putting that structure. into place. And so now all of a sudden in hospitals, which are just, they're bleaching everything and they're using ammonia, and it's a lot of toxicity for the residents of the hospitals, certainly the patients, you don't have to use that anymore because the bacteria simply never adheres to the surface. And
so they would be using that for surfaces or
exactly, they would
linen
use it on. Yeah, well, actually, you can't use it on fiber, but you
gotcha.
can use it on and catheters. You could use it on the arm handles of your hospital bed, the doorknobs.
Okay.
You could use it on a hard surface, and the same thing, or the structural color example, or there's an example of a company called Pax Scientific, and by looking at the flow forms, so the way that the seaweed moves in a turbulent ocean. But if you can pull a giant piece of kelp right off the rock with hardly any force, but it can withstand these huge big storms. So how's it doing that? And it's doing it because it's allowing this flow form of the edges of the kelp to move in a spiral fashion. It's the same way that we look at spirals in seashells and in sunflowers in our pores of our skin. That spiral pattern is the most efficient way to move fluids. And so this company emulated that with two things. One is a water mixer they called it a lily impeller, and it can move millions, I think 7 million gallons in an hour off of 300 watts. So 3 light bulbs basically. And now they're doing the same thing for fans. So air fans that you can buy for your home and for your office, they're 70-80% more efficient than the standard fan. It's because it pulls instead of pushes.
Yeah.
Because that's like is that not the perfect metaphor for what we do?
Yeah, totally.
And so these stories made me realize that we can get to this. We will need advanced chemistry always, but we're also not looking at the structural answers that nature provides, and we have to do both together. We have to look at these. Nature uses structure to change the function, that design function, that engineering function that we need. And then we need the right material palette to make it out of.
Yeah. That's wonderful. And all those more, all those structures and all those navigation tools that are different than that kind of, run with nature and how it's designed, and not trying to force, like you were saying, not pull, not push our preconceived ideas on that. But I wanted to ask you also, so to go back to the institute, the Biomimicry Institute, how do you all participate in all this? Like, is it through education or,
Yeah, so it is. Okay. And the Institute started back in 2006, and we have a few programs, and they're all based upon teaching people how to think this way. And it starts in middle school, like we were talking about. And we have a program called the Youth Design Challenge, and it's really it's free. Mm-hmm. Any teacher, any coach, you could be an after-school coach, you can be a Girl Scout or Boy Scout leader. You can download this for free, and it walks the kids through this process of how do you design inspired by nature. And like I said, the kind of submissions that we get it's so inspiring, and it's because they've really understood what it was that they were modeling. They and then the university students who participate in something called the Global Design Challenge, Biomimicry Global Design Challenge. And that's for not just university students, but anyone who's new to learning biomimicry. They all use Ask Nature. So you can go to asknature.org. Okay. It's our website. And we have biomimicry.org, which is where you can find the other programs. But Ask Nature is the tool. That's like the Wikipedia or the Google. Like that's where you type in your function. So you want to make a new filtration device, or you want to figure out how does nature attach, or how does nature cushion or insulate. You type in any of those verb kind of words, and you'll see a list of the organisms that do exactly that. And so that's how the participants get started with their design process. And there's two ways to do biomimicry. One is you think of a problem. I want to, the sort of like the famous example that we talk about a lot is there was in Japan, there was this bullet train, the Shinkansen train, and every time it went through the tunnel, it would cause a boom, a sonic pulse in front of it.
Yeah.
And because the lead engineer was a birder, he's like, wait a minute, how does nature go from one medium and density to the other, from, let's say, the density of air into water? And the answer was the kingfisher, with its very long beak, has to, in order to survive, go from the air into the water without making a splash. Otherwise, it would scare the fish. And so that is a challenge to biology kind of example. He thought of his problem and he reduced it down to a function, and then thought about the things that he knew about, in this case, birds, to accomplish that function.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so he made those Shinkansen tips really long and...
Exactly. So he changed it. Literally, it was called a bullet train because it looked like a bullet. It was rounded and short. And then now it's a very elongated nose.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
But the other way to do it is you're inspired. So like the famous example that we all have in our closets somewhere is Velcro.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was, right? That's because, George de Mistral is out hiking with his dog and a burr attaches to the dog's fur. And he gets curious about it. And that's like the root of biomimicry, and maybe the key to life in general is getting curious.
Yeah.
Leonardo da Vinci was very curious.
Yeah.
And that's why he's considered one of the best inventors of our time, of the world. But Mistral looked at it and saw those hooks on the edges of the burr and realized that that's how he could create something new. So that process is called biology to design. You sort of are intrigued by how it works, mm-hmm. and then you think, what can I do with it?
Yeah. That's wonderful. Yeah. If we observed and listened more, what could we see, right? What could we understand?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's the essence of it. A lot of people wonder, the way that a tree moves liquid is so different than how we move liquid and move. So specifically, any building over 100 feet tall loses about 75% in energy just from having to, work against gravity.
Yeah.
But trees don't have that luxury, right? They don't have external pumps to get the water up. So how is capillary action really working? Or when you get above a certain height, I think after 150 feet, capillary action doesn't work anymore. But there are trees like redwoods, they're 200, 250.
Yeah.
So how are they getting water to the top of their canopy? It's a totally different mechanism.
Please tell us.
Well, I barely understand it. Again, okay. Not a biologist. But I can tell you that it has to do with pulling ambient moisture into its stomata. So the redwoods survive along the coast here in California. Now, it's different for the sequoias, which are usually shorter but wider. Mm-hmm. But here on the coast, they are pulling up to 4 inches. They're sinking like 4 inches of rain equivalent a night because of that process. And a lot of it is not just going into the drip line, which is going to the roots, which is, again, relying on capillary action. A lot of it is actually just staying immediately at the canopy level. That's how it's taking in moisture directly. And there are so many of our innovations that come through our design challenges, both the Youth Design Challenge and then the global, where looking at how leaves capture fog, looking at how the Nama beetle can survive in a desert when it gets cold at night, or when it's the morning is first happening. There's that condensation period of change of temperature, and it uses enough. It basically lifts. This is the beetle, so it lifts the back of its body to capture that condensation difference, that difference in temperature. And those little droplets of moisture that form on its back get routed through the ridges and the bumps, and it just funnels it right into its mouth. And that little beetle has inspired so many innovations.
Wow.
There's a NBD Nano is a company that's looking at that same technology, and it's advanced long past that. But we don't have to have these big centralized systems. We can distribute nutrients in a very different way if we look at how nature does it.
Yeah, wonderful. Wow, that's so inspiring. And that youth design challenge you were talking about, is that available also to any kid or any school around the world?
That's right. Well, we have right now. It's a U.S. based
Okay.
judging process, so anybody can do it anywhere in the world. Unfortunately, we're only judging in the U.S. right now because we just don't have the networks set up. But we're trying to get those simultaneously set up. There are biomimicry networks in about 35 different countries, and we are rapidly trying to work with them to make sure that they can bring this to their local schools, because it's like I said, it's free, and so the teacher can use the material today, and they can use Ask Nature today, but it's just can it be judged by an external group? And that's probably the least, frankly, that's not the...
But yeah, I guess my question was, can they use it? Can they study it? Or
100%. Free to everybody.
Wonderful.
Please download it.
And that's on asknature.org or on biomimicry.org?
You can go to biomimicry.org and you'll see Youth Design Challenge.
Wonderful.
But if you go to Ask Nature, you can also get to it, and there's other resources for free. We have a toolbox that walks through how to do this. So the Youth Design Challenge, it's a storyline it's long. It's like 30 pages long. It's a lot of instruction for teachers who've never taught this before, because we felt it was really important that we lay this out so they don't have to become experts themselves.
Yeah.
But for others who are older or who just want to learn it for themselves, you can use our toolbox. And that's also for free on the biomimicry.org website. Or you can also get to it through Ask Nature and our resources. The resources section has lots of stuff, classes and videos and stuff.
I was asking because I'd like to connect you with a friend who does something like that, or along those lines anyway, here in Colombia with...
Cool.
They're obviously private schools, where they teach English. But she uses this word she's I don't know if she coined it or what, but she calls it biometaphors. So it's understanding, reconnecting to nature through that. And it's just very aligned with the work you're doing. So.
Well, it sounds like it, and she's welcome to use anything of ours. It's the reason that we became a nonprofit was so that we didn't want money to be the barrier. We wanted to make sure that these materials were for free, because so much, like there are these personal stories which we don't, we talk about the biology and the innovation, and that alone kind of can blow your mind. But one of my other favorite stories is this team of 18-year-old girls out of Egypt. And I don't know how much you know, but being a female in Egypt is not easy. Yeah. And yet these girls were in a design program, and they realized, wow, the canals that carry our open sewage are leading right into that agricultural field. And by the way, people are getting sick.
Okay.
25 years this was the case. And they would try to flush the open sewer. They would but they never changed the fact that it was an open sewage running right into their ag fields. And these girls said, well, I wonder how nature does it. They looked at a local organism, the camel, and how the camel's digestive tract works. And they didn't create it physically, but they created a design concept that would move the nutrients around basically in a series of circles. And so once you basically get enough surface area going, as you know from understanding how stomachs work, surface area is the key, and exposing it to beneficial bacteria is the key. Cow stomachs work the same way. Anaerobic digesters work the same way. You have to basically lots of surface area and then expose it to beneficial bacteria and enzymes. But they did it in this really elegant design pattern of following what the camel's stomach works like. And they can change the outcome of the health of their village, even though they're girls, even though they're 18 years old, because they're in this position. They were our design challenge winner that year.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
Those are we want to democratize. I know that word carries some pros and cons to it, but we want to make this an open source process. For everybody.
Wow, that's wonderful. So inspiring. what else can we? Is there anything that we haven't covered, Beth?
There's so much. I know.
There's so much to talk, and I just love how we started from the gut to all of this, and how it.
That's right. Back to the gut again. That's where we ended up. I think. Look, we also sometimes do work with industry, like the project we're doing for fashion. The reason we were talking about fashion a little bit and why I even know so much about it right now is because the C&A Foundation. C&A is like H&M here in the States. I don't know if you remember them, but it's a big fast fashion brand, and fast fashion is under a lot of scrutiny right now, saying like, well, do we need, again, 80 to 100 billion garments a year? No, of course not. And so what can the industry do to shift? It's some of the biggest brands are becoming very conscious very quickly. It's reminding me a lot of the food movement, where you had leading chefs like Dan Barber, like people like yourself, who were saying like, wait a minute, we can eat very differently than we are.
Yeah. And
we're seeing designers like Stella McCarthy and Eileen Fisher take this stand bigger than just like Patagonia even. And so CNA has asked us to say, well, how would we change the system? And part of it comes back to that recognition that, wait a minute, well, humans are messy. This idea of a technical polyester loop forever and ever is probably not going to work. So what can we do differently? Mm-hmm. And so we do get the opportunity to work a lot with industry to help them rethink how nature would inspire a different system. And I think going sort of like, again, full circle, just to kind of end up where we started, was I think that's what we're going to see. In the end, we're going to see that return of bioregionalism. It's going to be like the opposite of the moonshot. When Kennedy said we can be on the moon in 10 years, and the average age of the engineer at NASA in Houston was 26. So when he made that announcement, the day that basically, the first man landed on the moon, they were 26. So when he made the announcement, Kennedy, 10 years earlier, those kids were 16. Yeah. They were in high school. So that's why we feel like we have to target. We can do this in one generation. We really can. We can.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's wonderful.
That's where we are. And the answers are here. We have to look out the window. But it's really, really possible. I think the one thing I would want people who hear this to realize is that the answers exist. And it's just, and the beautiful part is that you're going to have so much fun learning. It's not going to be arduous. You're going to fall in love with nature the way that you did back when you were a kid. You're going to be looking at butterflies, and you're going to be looking at earthworms, and you're going to see a very different world.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Beth.
Yeah,
that's very inspiring. Very inspiring.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and it was so easy and wonderful to talk to you. You're just you're leading the work yourself, and I just really appreciate who you are.
Thank you. And you. So awesome. I'll definitely well, first, thanks for showing up and making the time for this, and then I'll send you invitations for the workshops and the retreats.
Please do.
The fermentation retreats in Colombia.
I want to be part of your fermentation retreats. I think I want to be one of your first clients, your personal clients. I want a stool sample. I want everything.
Yeah.
But it would be. I'm serious. Actually, it's fortuitous that you should share your story, because this is exactly where I am right now.
Good. Yeah. I mean, start with that test. It's amazing. It gives you such a detailed.
What's it called again?
Biome. Viome.
Oh, I saw an advertisement for it. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you can deploy all the good stuff.
I'm on it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Tomas.
Thank you so much, Beth. Have a great one.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.